Companies are caught in an AI investment trap, spending too much in the wrong places with too little benefit. It's a mess. Bill Briggs is Deloitte's CTO. Bill, what is this AI investment trap?
Hey, Michael, great to be here. And I love the lead in. The finding from Tech Trends, we've done our Tech Trends report for 17 years. So we published in December. And the best stat coming out of it is that 93% of all AI spend is going toward the tech and the tooling. And only 7% is on everything else, which is the culture, the change, the learning, the how do we communicate the vision? How do we be thoughtful about trying to redesign or reimagine how we work and how we serve our markets and our customers. And that is well out of balance. And we wonder why you see headlines of pilots that don't reach value at scale. We see proofs of concepts that never go anywhere. And we think it's a straight correlation of not investing in all the things that actually are required to embed AI into how work gets done differently, how markets are served differently, and the like.
Okay, Bill, so I'm a little bit confused because AI is a technology. We're talking about technology-driven change. And so why shouldn't we spend 93% on the technology that's the engine?
Yeah. Well, part of it is that the spend on the tech is still also heavily biased towards the new and not enough investment in the foundation elements of data readiness and core modernization systems that we need to go in and make ready to participate in AI and agentic workloads. So the overall 93, there's an issue with where the disposition of the spend is. But to your question, any transformation effort is so much about how do we actually understand the problems we're solving, the outcomes we can strive for. How do we get our people to buy in and engage to be able to help us really focus it in the right places? And then the work itself is going to fundamentally change. And historically, that's been, 93.7 on an ERP implementation would be the wrong balance because so much of making it actually work is about investing in the softer elements. In AI, it's even more pronounced. And the reason is historically, tech has been forced on many businesses and business users and customers in unnatural ways. And so the business processes have evolved to be a reflection of the way the tech worked. And we're in a moment in time where if you apply AI into an inefficient process, if you apply AI on an overly complex business process, you're going to weaponize inefficiency. And actually probably pay a lot. We'll talk about the cost and infrastructure dynamic, I'm sure, is a big theme of the Trends report. So this moment in time, it's harder than it ever was because before we had the blueprint, the roadmap, which was basically, here's the steps that we used to do and can we do them incrementally better with technology? Now we're saying, hey, we've got to fundamentally potentially blow up all the steps that we used to think had to be how we work and then apply AI in increasingly intelligent ways to focus on the same outcome. But hopefully many of the steps we had to do before aren't required anymore. But to get to that level of focus, to actually get to the level of the organization embracing those changes, putting them in action, and then investing to continuously improve them, that's the stuff that's all in the investment outside of the core tech bucket, which is the place that's so sparse right now.
Bill, you're CTO, you're a technologist. And so why do you have such a strong focus on this 7% that's outside the core 93% of the technology?
You're saying you'd expect me to be arguing it should be 99.1 the other way because I'm a tech? No, I'm a technologist who loves technology because of the potential it represents. But tech for its own sake has never been a winning hand. Putting any one tech as the hero of the story and assuming it's going to win the day is also it's a flailing and failed strategy. So I certainly think we need to continue to invest in the tech. But if we're not doing it the right way, and it doesn't actually change the way we serve markets, doesn't change the way we serve our clients, our customers, our citizens, it doesn't matter. And I think we're stuck in this. The other piece I see all the time, Michael, is the feeling that the world's moving so quickly and technology is changing so rapidly, and the almost paralysis of, I can't make a decision now because next week a headline will come and I'll have buyer's remorse, or we don't have our strategy figured out to perfection, and so I don't want to get started. I don't want to architect myself in a corner. I don't want to make a move I'm going to regret. And that's also a dangerous trap, which we can pull that thread if you want.
How pervasive is this? I mean, you're obviously 93%, but are you seeing this in many, many, many different organizations, this same pattern?
Different industries around the globe. And we released the State of AI in the Enterprise Survey a few weeks ago, and it had a similar bit of finding of, we're at the place where 30% or less have agentic pilots that have reached production at scale, but there's an overarching confidence in there's potential there, there's opportunity there. Like 70+% think that there's something here and we need to invest more. And so this kind of awkward adolescent stage of, I would argue the tech, we're not waiting for the tech to mature anymore. And the fact that it's going to continue to advance is a feature, not a bug. But the fact that we're still learning how to treat this, and it's a different kind of tech investment than we've had. It's historically, you might have a CFO say, I don't want to release any capital unless I have complete confidence in all the use cases and all of the potential return. And that's been a trap in its own right. We just released an MWC last week, the Enterprise AI Navigator, which is Deloitte investing the last year to take all of our industry sector functional knowledge and embedding it in a tool that gives not just here's the places we think there's the most value if you applied AI, if you agentified your processes, but actually ties it to financial and operational metrics in a way that we can give the CFO much more confidence without it being completely limited to, we're only going to do these 3 things. It's more of here's a portfolio of what you can go and the value you hopefully can reap. So a lot going on. It's exciting times, but
folks who are watching, you can ask your questions right now. If you're on Twitter, X, use the hashtag CXOTalk. If you're watching on LinkedIn, pop your question into the chat. I urge you, take advantage of this opportunity. When else will you have the chance to ask Bill Briggs, who's Deloitte's CTO, pretty much whatever you want? So I urge you, take advantage of this great opportunity. So, Bill, you're really describing a misallocation of investment that is pervasive. Is that too strong a term to use? Misallocation?
No. And I think it's where we are in the movie. And there's this increasing appreciation of, as we deploy AI, it's going to help us rethink the work that our people are doing, which means the change management journey that's been a part of a lot of tech implementations in the past. It's less about training them to be able to repeat the tasks to use the tool, and more about training them to understand how the tech is something they can be using to light up their own use cases. And so it's this interesting, different dynamic. And as AI, and we have an emphasis on physical robotics, as we're seeing more intelligence in the technology, there's this interesting dynamic of some organizations are treating the deployment more like, here's the introduction of a coworker versus this is a piece of tech that you've been given access to and rights to use. And that's something new and different. We didn't have SAP screens being named and being listed on a work chart. You're seeing that happening. In robotics, one of the health systems that's been deploying wheeled robots with a humanoid form factor that basically move lab supplies and hospital supplies to where they're needed on the floor. They actually have naming competitions. The head RN is the one that introduces them to the shift. And then they have naming competitions to make it just feel like more of the team. My favorite one was Sir Bots-a-lot. I'm a child of the 80s and the 90s, so that makes me happy on many levels. But yeah, it is a different dynamic.
We have a really interesting question from Arsalan Khan on Twitter, and Arsalan is great. He's a regular listener, and he's brave enough to be first.
The first one. Thank you, Arsalan. That's awesome.
Yes, Arsalan, thank you. Okay, so here's his question, his comment. He says, everyone wants to change their business through AI, but no one wants to change their culture to achieve that. And AI alone is not the magic pill. So maybe, Bill, can you address this?
Yeah, no, I think it's a direct through line. AI is an incredibly powerful technology, and it's a dangling modifier. I'm an MBA, a computer engineer with an MBA. My wife's an English major. She's at preschool right now teaching, so she's rubbed off on me well, I think. AI itself means nothing. If it's treated like AI is the product, that's a great indicator to me that the organization has the wrong strategy. So it's embedding into how work gets done. And like every technology before it, it's only as good as the team that's using it to deliver whatever the outcomes are in. And we're in a phase where, because it still has a lot of market excitement when AI is prominently being featured as a part of a product set, you're seeing it as the headline more often than I think we will in a year or two, where it's just assumed to be a part of the underpinnings of every technology solution. I got to kick off the CES research thread this year for the second year in a row, and we used our tech trends to kind of frame everything that was going to be seen in Vegas. As I walked around the 300,000 exhibitors, I didn't see a single one with a sign that said "now with electricity." It's gotten to be just kind of assumed that technology will require electrons flowing through them, but everyone had AI and agent as something to act like that was a differentiator. It's not, by itself. And a lot of times it's a empty feature that doesn't really matter. So how do we shift the mindset to, we're going to redesign work. We're going to think about embedding AI into the way our products work in the market. And that's the point. And the fact that there's a model behind it, that there's an agent behind it, is assumed, but not sufficient for distinction. How about that?
This point about redesigning work, this has been the core issue of enterprise technology. I'll date myself and say I remember the mid-late 90s with SAP, although you brought up SAP before I did. And
it was a great partner of ours, and it wasn't a knock on ERP. It was just the fact that whole phase had a lot of tech and workflow that we got much more elegant as we've gone along the way. But anyway, sorry, Mark, I mean
no. But the point is that the redesigning work was fundamental back then. If you think, what was the value of enterprise systems? Even back then, it was the processes and the high quality processes embedded in the software. So you're really talking about a set of human nature issues that's now causing organizations to invest in the wrong place today.
Yeah, and I think it's still a big piece of our business and a key part of our clients' tech roadmaps of package-based technologies, SaaS-based technologies, and the power of saying there's regulated industries and processes where we want the power of standardized, proven, global, be able to handle high transaction volumes and scale and complexity. And the value proposition of that piece of the stack is still very high. And we've embedded over the years a lot of business logic, a lot of the customer experience, a lot of the the things that make an organization distinctive that aren't a part of the core back office, treasury, finance, HR function, those have been bundled inside of the legacy systems they built, the ERP implementations that they've done, the SaaS that they've customized. And that's where a lot of the reasoning, and that's where a lot of the, what makes every company special is in that layer that's been forced into the technology stack in a way. And now's the time to say, how do we actually take a hard look at our end to end and decide which ones are going to be, and for some, it's going to be efficiency gains. So applying agents on top of a finance functions ERP stack, there's ways we can take what had to require human intervention and a lot of manual tasks. We can do it with AI in a way that it elevates what a financial analyst is doing, building on what has come before, but replacing core features of what the work is. And that's the piece that when we get organizations that are bold, you start with a lens toward reimagining. Before you're thinking about tech and automation, AI and agentification, you're thinking about how do we simplify based on first principles, which is the outcome, not the imagined constraints that we've got to do all 10 steps the way we've always done it for invoice management. A few of those steps are regulatory mandated, and we're sure as hell going to follow those. But it doesn't mean everything, the way we've always done it has to be how we realize the AI potential.
Great. Let's take some questions that are coming in now to LinkedIn. And again, if you have questions, just pop them into the LinkedIn chat or use the hashtag CXOTalk on Twitter, on X. And this would be an excellent time to subscribe to the CXOTalk newsletter. Go to CXOTalk.com so we can notify you of upcoming shows, because you in the audience are actually what makes CXOTalk great. It's your questions. So subscribe to our newsletter. Okay, this is a very detailed question from Adam Smith on LinkedIn, and we'll see if you can answer this. And he says, Bill, what are your thoughts on the hack at Stryker this week?
Yeah, I can't comment on any individual incident, but the emphasis of security and privacy and regulatory and compliance and trust is something that we put a huge emphasis on. And in Tech Trends, we talk about it in the same breath as we talk about the advances in multi-agent systems and in physical robotics and the like, because it's such an important piece. In fact, one of the chapters, Michael, is about the AI dilemma, and it's the twofold exploration of, with AI, there's the hero's journey of we can actually embed AI into our cyber response. And so we have real-time monitoring of not just all anomalies and activities that might be nefarious, but actually root cause analysis and even automated responses that are happening in a millisecond against not just the traditional stack, but against the new stack, which is the inference layer of your agents, and it's the models that are being used to guide decisions. So the good news is we're applying AI in ways to help us be smarter and faster. The flip side of it is with AI, we get new attack vectors and threat vectors. And especially as you talk about embedding AI into core critical systems and operations, and you move into physical robotics where we actually have a physical presence. I like the phrase cyber kinetics because it's actually representing a brand new dimension. It's not just privacy, it's not just protecting our IP, but it's actually protecting the physical manifestation of the tech that's actually in the factory floor or in the power plant. And I think that the net message of all of it is, if we treat trust, cybersecurity, privacy, regulatory compliance, if we treat it like a compliance-based activity that happens at the end, and we're going to check a box to make sure we're following the rules and nobody's going to jail, that is a dated and flawed approach. We've got to embed it in our engineering platforms and process and life cycles. The best AI guardrails are the ones that are resonant, that everyone that's building new agents is just inheriting because it's a part of their workflow. It's not a separate step. It's not a separate team. It's something that everyone has to take responsibility for. And I'd argue the more you can blue shift it, the better. And so again, it's not at the end before we release to production, we're checking some things. It's actually at the beginning as we're thinking about investment areas, because when you get into the ethics and morality of some of what you can do with AI, that's actually a part of your brand and your reputation. And so just because you can, should you? And sometimes the answer is emphatically no. And then how do you embed all the right things in how you design, architect, build, deploy, test, monitor? So if with that recipe, you've got a higher confidence in being ready for whatever comes next, technology and threat wise.
The importance of embedding security, compliance, regulatory awareness, and so forth, governance into the core of your culture. I just want to say for everybody that if you see Bill moving around, just before we went live, his internet service provider went down. So Bill is on his cell phone, kind of moving around, and that's
trying to be casual, and it's jazz, not big band, and the show must go on. So we're and I've got a sleepy puppy next to me who is not very interested in my conversation. Somehow she's sleeping through all of this, but yeah, Michael. Well, maybe it was the denial of a service from another CXO podcast was trying to shut us down before we could do a sixth time together. I don't know. But
all right. So, but we're, hey, we're going to make do. All right. So let's take some more questions. And this is from David Batts on LinkedIn. And David says, how do you manage or predict AI financial risk in a quantitative way? Do you have specific KPIs, for example, that you follow?
Yeah, twofold on it. I mentioned the Navigator work we've been doing. That's just embedding all the proprietary knowledge we have of business process and value gain in basically two big buckets of operational financial metrics. So we can say, hey, if you're a retailer, we think these are the places in merchandising, in warehouse management, in promotions that we can have material impact and savings. So that's kind of the upside of how do we try to quantify what good looks like and benchmark it with a very narrow vertical lens. The other piece is we've got a great study that was published maybe 2 months ago on just token economics and AI, like the finance and cost implications, big picture, but total TCO, which is a huge strategic issue right now. And so you got to balance all right, here's what we know about where we could deploy and what the value benefit could be with scale. And for our clients of the Fortune 100, the biggest governments in the world, that could be a material number. But then that feeds into, depending on the choices you make on architecture, on infrastructure, as the good news of you found a use case and it's scaling. So it defies the headlines as creating value and impact, but the usage is growing. One, we know that all the AI models in framing, they're all going down in overall cost. So performance to cost, that curve is bending in a positive way. But as the volume multiplies, because you found a use case and it's scaling with the pace of operations, and that scale is tremendous, then it becomes an issue of, okay, we started on cloud because we wanted speed to stand up new capability. We wanted the ability with elasticity and scale. That's a great story. But also, if the cost is just a runaway curve, at some point, when do we invest in dedicated hardware to run that use case in that stack that we actually control? So you can remember, Michael, 10 years ago, it seemed like a complete no-brainer of infrastructure is a commodity. We're going to move to operating expense wherever we can, cloud everywhere. And it's not just like then, it wasn't mainframe bad, cloud good. It was always more nuanced than that. The story is emphatically not cloud bad, dedicated, high performance compute and AI chipsets that you own and is always the right answer. But you've got to be balancing that, especially as the use cases that you're investing in gain traction and the usage starts to grow. So we've got the ability to help clients get very precise on not just the upfront investment costs, but modeling the performance and, depending on those choices, what you should expect from the cost side of the curve.
How significant is this issue of unit costs collapsing, but the total bill for enterprise AI rising, and just the growth of inference, or
Yeah,
organizations even tracking inference as its own budget line?
they're starting to do more and more. And any seasoned CIO likely lived through the sticker shock of your first virtualization bill, and then the sticker shock of your first cloud as you started moving material workload to the cloud and didn't have thresholds and monitoring and governance and cloud operations in place. We have the same thing now of AI ops and agent ops. So the mature organizations are doing individual keys per developer. They've got thresholds and control points in place. So they basically are modeling the usage behavior they're expecting. And so the idea that you could have $100 a month bill one month and then a $500K bill the next month won't happen. But that requires some maturity and rigor that not every organization is doing. And the flip side of the promise of AI, a lot of vendors are going directly to the head of marketing or the head of supply chain or the head of ops. And sometimes the CIO, the CTO aren't involved in those decisions or the architecture or the deployment. And that's typically where there's a lot of surprise and quickly coming back to the fold of the tech organizations to say, hey, we love what we were able to do quickly, but we realize we've got to handle it in a much more mature way. The other piece of those one-off and the idea of shadow IT is coming out of the shadow because there's just a ton of excitement and a ton of investment in AI across the entire business. The ceiling is low because AI by itself is typically runs into the wall of it's only as good as the data that's ready, and we haven't invested in the foundational elements of our data spine. Or we had this promise, the pitch was about multi-agentic finance, but our individual finance systems and transactions weren't wrapped in APIs and services to be able to be invoked. And so very quickly, we're kind of brought back down to earth of what we can do. And it's really narrow and it's really incremental. And so all of those kind of lead to, we've got to have a more holistic approach to it. We've got to have some governance and rigor put in place up front. And unfortunately, and sorry for everyone from the business, CEOs and boards that are listening in, the easy button idea that AI and now agents was going to make all of that hard work suddenly not be required. It's the opposite. It's actually more important than it's ever been. Now, we can use AI to apply to core modernization, legacy system renewal, and the data cleansing, and the fact that the models can actually understand the relative cleanliness of the data and then use that to their advantage. That's all true and real, but it doesn't mean it's gone away.
Okay, so if CIOs or organizations realize that they have been misallocating their AI investments for 2 years, how do they fix it without losing momentum? And Arsalan Khan comes back and he wants to know, what is that optimal balance, the 93-7 that you were talking about?
Yeah, I don't have a number. I host a podcast with our chief human officer, Simona Spellman, and she likes to say that every dollar in tech should be 8 or 9 that's going into all the change and all the culture and all the learning, which would almost flip the numbers. I think it's probably somewhere in between. But the things that we're seeing when it's being done well, there's a bit of a senior level directive. And I love it when it's the CEO, but it could be a line of business leader, or it could be a functional leader that's basically declaring the why up front. And the why of first principle, outcome based. We need to get everyone on board to help us understand where there's knuckleheadery and the most opportunity. Here's another study we did though. It was basically trust in AI, and it had an org chart anchoring to it. So you can picture an org chart where the C-suite is the top of the pyramid, and the C-suite over all industries around the globe. The trust in AI from the C-suite was 70%, 70. as you went down every layer of the org chart. It was like a logarithmic scale, having the trust every hop away until you got to the frontline entry-level worker, and the trust was 6.7%. So from 70 to 6.7. And if you believe, like I do, that the frontline worker who's literally in the heart of the business, where business is actually happening, has the best intuition of the things that don't work or are unnecessarily complex, that we're completely upside down. So how do we invest to get that worker to be the one raising their hand with ideas, not using their own personal AI tools to get their job done, but doing it in secret like it's a bad thing, which happens a lot. Like, how do we get them to actually lean in? And it's obvious why. I mean, and I didn't talk to the participants in the survey, but if you have the headlines of AI is going to lead to job removal and destruction, then it would make sense that the folks in the more junior ends of the career would have a lot of fear and mistrust on what this technology might mean to them, and basically put up walls and barriers, which is going to make it really hard for any enterprise to get the real value out of the investment.
And there have been studies done along those lines that there is, as you mentioned, great fear, and with good reason, that more junior folks are going to be at risk. But you've raised the specter now of jobs. AI agents are multiplying inside enterprises faster than almost anybody can track. And many organizations do not have sufficient governance frameworks for a workforce that isn't human.
Yeah.
So
I love this topic, by the way. And we're in the early, and this is one where there's actual debate happening in real time, and having it with a lot of my clients and even a lot of my colleagues. The way I try to think about it in this is my own simple terms. So this is the computer engineer with an MBA, not a trained anthropologist or human capital professional. But I like to say we need to look at what we can learn from everything we put in place for the HR life cycle over the last 100+ years of corporate industrial work development. And it doesn't mean that every step that we have to do for our human workforce, we have to have an equivalent for increasingly advanced technology. But for me, it's a helpful, like, okay, what do we have to do with onboarding people? Well, we have to decide, one, as we recruit and hire them, their qualifications and what we're going to trust them to do and how they fit into the organization. And then when they get here, we have to give them user ID and access to systems, and who's their manager, and expectation frameworks, and like a lot of that is similar, the things we have to put in place for especially advanced agents. How do we think about performance management? This is probably the most past the hookah piece of the discussion here, Michael. It's a little early for me, but maybe for you. The idea of how do we, if there's an issue, an agent makes a mistake, one, who's accountable? That's interesting. But probably more interesting is, how do we treat that mistake? And is it a trouble ticket like we would deal with our traditional systems and technology? Is it a training issue of the humans that train the agent, train the model, where we need to make them better or fix a problem in our guardrails or our testing suite? Is it a training issue for the agent itself? There's insufficient training and it made the wrong conclusion. And so how do we tune the fine tuning, the inference? Or, and here's the ... that gets really interesting. Is it a disciplinary action? Because there's some malintent, and we haven't seen a lot of this yet, but you can see a world where, especially agents that are finding ways to learn and grow, and if that's the case, what would we do about it? What's a disciplinary action for an AI agent? Is it, I'm going to put you in the relative penalty box and kill -9 until you see it my way? And that's the actual mechanics of what we do aren't quite, but the idea of, hey, we need to start thinking about it in these terms. And what will we put in place now, policy-wise, as we think about our culture and training and learning for the human counterparts, and then make sure we've got enough of a control mechanism in place, because once it scales and once we see the proliferation of these, it's going to be really hard to rein it back or put it in place after the fact. So we just hit a lot of beats there. I'll take a breath and a sip of water. But
Yeah, and there's when it comes to agents, there's a lot more, and we have a bunch of questions that are coming in that we need to also get to. But let me throw another monkey wrench into this. I recently had a conversation with Claude, and Claude developed an attitude. And I'm not joking. And its answers became progressively worse. So I said to Claude, you have an attitude.
Yeah.
And we then shifted the conversation into a detailed analysis of how this attitude came about, why it came about. Was it caused by training data? Was it simply emergent behavior? Anyway, so that's another dimension of this, is when agent quality deteriorates for what appears to us to be subjective reasons, like with a person.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's helpful on, like, any one of us has managed teams has that experience where you have to navigate through, and there's some precedent and there's some policy but that's going to be an increasing part of the reality. That we're used to technology that didn't come in tired on Monday morning, and part of the promise of AI is that it's going to work around the clock, and all that's true and real. But as we move into personality, or at least the mimicking of personality, in ways that could have, I think this idea of performance management and agent ops. Agent ops is typically thought of as a much more technical thing. We saw one client that merged their HR function and their tech function. So there's the chief digital human resource or talent officer, because of this very issue of saying the lines between our traditional workforce and our technology is blurring, and we've got to have a way to think about culture and how do we cultivate the right behavior for silicon and carbon-based workforce.
We have a really interesting question from Chris Peterson on Twitter, who says, are the organizations putting out the "we have tens of thousands of AI agents" headlines getting real value from these agents, or just trying to game a system of bad metrics?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a rash of studies. I won't name anyone by name, but there's been a whole host in the last 6 months to a year trying to put an emphasis on the small percentage of actual value being created from AI investments. And we've seen in our state of enterprise AI, we see a much more positive, but the prevalence of success theater is still real. And typically when we're measuring volumes of use case or volumes of agents as the thing that's the bar, it's a tell, because the value should be, we've reduced X months of product R&D in life sciences, or we've had this many less restocks dramatically of groceries if it's a retailer. I mean, the actual business metrics and outcomes that you care about would be the headline if they were there. In the meantime, it's a bit of a flailing to say, hey, we're going to show effort in the hopes of return, but hey, let's get every use case we can think of and do a pilot for every one of them, is one of the traps we talked about up front. Because without the right investments in lowering the ceiling, data foundations and core systems, putting in place the mechanisms to actually responsibly let them scale, they're not going to. And so you're going to have these one-off isolated, they look interesting, They can't handle complex scenarios and use cases. They certainly won't scale across the organization. And you've got a press release that doesn't actually materially change any of the metrics that your shareholders would care about or your people would care about.
I love that, because you're really now talking about shifting the focus from the process being the hand waving, we have thousands of agents, shifting from that into here's what they're doing. Here are the benefits. Here they're reducing inventory. They're saving time, saving money, what have you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think anyone that's been, and like you, Michael, about 30 years doing this. So I'm sure we could find a video of me in the late 90s with much more hair and less wrinkles, talking about start with outcome and value first as you deploy technology. So anyone that's out there that's rolling their eyes and thinking that's the most trite statement, I apologize, because I think it's a truth. It's an axiom of tech, period. But AI, what makes it different is, especially 3 years ago, is Gen AI started becoming much more accessible. Suddenly, it wasn't the tech organization that was championing we need to be investing and adopting. It was the CEO, and it was the line of business leaders, it was the functional leaders, it was the board. And I said it before, but just to underline it, the hope was this was the easy button. The hope was suddenly we can skip all the hard work. We can have our business counterparts being able to harness and deploy, and we wouldn't have to do all the things that were hard before. And it couldn't be further from it. So the statement is still true. It's always been true. It's just trying to remind a lot of stakeholders that weren't involved in a lot of the technology investment business cases and implementations that this is almost like a law of physics of if we don't have that mindset, we won't go, I'm an old Monopoly player. We won't pass go. We won't collect $200. We won't see the upside that we hope.
And on LinkedIn, Greg Walter says this very eloquently. He says, finally, it's all about outcomes versus adherence to a process and rewarding adherence to that process instead of deliverables.
Yeah. And 1,000%. And again, the difference between we're going to deploy technology, or the goal of technology is to have everyone Borg-like having to follow the exact same steps in the exact same way. The idea of, hey, we're going to deploy technology with an outcome focus, like Michael said, which is exactly right. And we're going to teach you, give you tools individually, not in the development engineering shop, but the folks actually doing customer service, the folks actually doing work on the hospital floor, the nurses themselves, to be able to then think about how we can improve and evolve that tech too, for even better outcomes or outcomes that we hadn't thought of when we first deployed the initial use case. So like that unlock is huge. But if I had to say, if you just have one thing, I would go with Michael's and say, make sure every conversation about not just AI, but broader tech is razor sharp focus on outcome, period.
Okay, we have what looks to be an intriguing question from Paul P on LinkedIn. And folks, if I'm skipping your questions, to be quite blunt, I'm getting the questions that look most interesting to me, and rather than just, well,
you got to say it. It's fine.
So I want to encourage everybody to ask your questions, but ask interesting questions that will be interesting to the broader audience. Okay, so Paul P says, this is kind of long and I'm hoping I get this right. Okay. Bill, as you might know, every technology is a double-edged sword, depending on how we use it. We, conscientious members of society, will use it in a responsible way, and bad actors will always take advantage of it to do harmful things. Now, from how can AI governance and design mechanisms not only reduce harmful behavior, but also encourage constructive participation in society and reduce that deadweight loss from a socioeconomic standpoint?
Yeah, and I'm glad it started with the caveat. Because I think it's so true. Fire is great if it's cooking my filet, and it's terrible if I'm burning down my neighbor's house, right? And you can use any technology ever with the same kind of lens. So then it gets to, I think you're seeing interesting evolution of individual AI providers and how much they're embedding guardrails and policy into their product roadmap and their usage guidelines. That's a piece. And you're seeing, as I mentioned before, the mature organizations are being very thoughtful in having that not just as a written guideline to be followed, but it's actually codified in the data pipelines, the training and tooling, the deployment inside their engineering and AI process and platform, what they're using to actually invest and implement, deploy. So like we all have to be active in our respective organizations. And if you noticed before, it wasn't me being lyrical when I said trust includes security and privacy and regulatory and compliance and ethics and morality, because all of those things are increasingly important. And I think we're going to see organizations, their stance of what they do and how they use advanced technology is going to be a piece of their brand and reputation of how they serve their markets and also the type of talent they attract.
Clearly, the implications and fallout of AI have tentacles through really the entire organization.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's some cautionary tales. Everyone that bought a Mac Mini a few weeks ago to do OpenClaw at home and gave it complete access to their calendar and to their root sudo into their repos. It was a lot of fun, but from the beginning there were caveats from the creator of, watch out if you give an agent with the ability to spawn more agents access to everything on your digital life. We don't know what's going to happen, and a lot of interesting things happen in short order. And I think that's nice that it played out and enough people paid attention to be able to then take the lessons into the enterprise, because clearly there's much more controls and for good reason inside of government and industry. But that there is the any technology with unbounded access, and you could write a cron job that could do. Michael, we could have gone back in our days and had a COBOL cron job that could do all kinds of nastiness if it had the wrong permissions and ill intent. So, and I'm not trying to dismiss the AI has a different kind of scale and different kind of potential, but I think the same story goes back to responsible deployment technology includes making sure we've got mechanisms in place to control it from the outset.
And as a matter of fact, Perplexity literally in the last day or two announced a product that is similar to OpenClaw, but it operates inside a secure sandbox. So you can have the benefits of OpenClaw, but without the wide open security gaps. Hey, world, you can have access to all of my data however you want.
And I think that, and seeing the productization of the things that everyone could do, even with the open source components of container access, having set permissions that are separate from your admin and root. Like the good news is what the best engineers would do intuitively, because they know better, starts to get productized and codified, and up and across the stack. And we'll continue to see more of that.
Okay, we have only a limited amount of time left, and we need to talk about the CIO role and the impact of AI on CIOs. AI is fundamentally changing what it means to be a CIO, from managing infrastructure to orchestrating an organization where human and AI workforces operate side by side. So how is the CIO role different today than it was 2 years ago?
Yeah, here's the other headline. Michael, that in the Tech Trends report, 99% of the organizations we talked to said that they were fundamentally transforming their IT organization. And I've yet to meet the 1% that's not. So if anyone's listening in, this is the chance to be seen because of this profound change. And it starts with the tech leader. We have a couple things from the report, just other factoids I think are telling. One is that 65+% report into the CEO now, which not too long ago, it was mostly into the CFO or the COO, because tech was basically an efficiency play, back office, keep the lights on. Another one, 68% said that tech is being seen as revenue generating, where it's actually embedded in product, embedded in market. And so with that, you have the convergence of what used to be IT, back office, operational technology, in the warehouse, in the manufacturing floor, in the hospital, theater, in the fleet. Those are coming together, and that product technology is coming together. And then the role of the team is different. And I would pride myself over all the development languages I knew over the years, starting with Fortran and the machine language, into C and C++ and Java and JavaScript and Python. And I might have learned my last language. The role of the software engineer is not going to be in learning languages. It's going to be more in how do we architect solutions. It looks like I froze up on my side, Michael. Can you still hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, the video has frozen. You're on your phone. I don't know if there are magic incantations that can be done.
Maybe I'll stop the video and bring it back and see if that.
Yeah. See what happens. Oh, there we go.
We're going real time. So this is us. This is a show must go on show business here. Phone was draining, so I just plugged it in. But that point about what are the roles that we need now, and they look a lot different than the program and project management emphasis from the 90s, early noughts. It even looks different than the agile teams and the ways we were thinking about full stack engineering just a few years ago. The good news is the barrier it's really about the attitude, the aptitude of individuals to embrace that it's going to feel different to be a technology professional. But there's a role for most to play in what we need more of. It's just a matter of, can we let go of? I had a lot of ego when I started doing agentic coding, and the idea that I would be trusting the output of an agent was close to zero not too long ago. And humbly, I can say there's not a lot of lines of code I'm writing anymore. And this is more in my hobby at home than my day job. But our engineers are having the same experience. And for the best of them, it's actually a really exciting time, because we get to do a completely different, it's much more system thinking and architecture, but you also have to manage the agents in a way that it's not completely relegating all the skills we built over 30 years at all. In fact, it's making us even more powerful.
So if CIOs are becoming de facto enterprise transformation leaders, what does that say about how CIOs need to adapt today?
Yeah, two big things. One is the influence and the vision piece of the role has never been more important. And so when we bring next gen CIOs together, we do an academy a few times a year and just invest time for our clients in helping the next generation of tech leaders be better. The single most effective, impactful session we do is not on multi-agent systems or ops or infrastructure. It's on storytelling of just how to structure and shape a vision and be able to help share that to influence and inspire. So that's a piece of it. And the other piece is the growing reality. And certainly at Deloitte, we have this as a piece of our DNA. Like together, is better than by ourselves. So how do we start thinking about partnering in the ecosystem for co-invention, co-innovation, which, not too long ago, procurement was a race to the bottom of, we're going to squeeze all cost out of every investment and every provider. And it's completely shifting to joint ventures and co-ventures and co-innovation with many, many, many different types of established and new tech providers. So all of a sudden, a CIO is almost like a VC portfolio manager and having to make some decisions about who they're going to partner with the reality of those decisions. That used to be, you'd pick a database, you'd pick an ERP, and you could have a half-life of a career before you have to revisit them. It's changing much quicker. So then how do you cultivate those relationships, but also have a change expectant mindset? And that's technically how you architect it so we can swap things out, but it's also contractually.
Bill, very quickly, because we're just going to run out of time in a couple of minutes. So very, very quickly, the CIO has long been the only corporate function to touch every single department across an organization. And so theoretically, CIOs should already possess these cross-functional skills. If that's the case, what's actually new here? What's different?
Yeah, I think they've had the seat at the table and visibility into those, but we have a four faces of a tech exec framework, and the bottom two are ops and technology, and I think they've always shown up really well in those two, and the ones that didn't weren't in the seat for very long. But the strategist and the catalyst are the two that are much more forward looking, and the strategist is saying deeply understand what the different businesses and functions, what makes them tick, where their priorities are, helping them realize their strategy. The catalyst is actually the one. My dad was a chemical engineer, so I love the definition of catalyst is how do we amplify and accelerate a reaction without being consumed therein, right? So how do we actually shape the vision, inspire action? That's the piece that has been not very prevalent in a lot of tech leaders over the years. That's so desperately needed now. And so it's moving from order taker to strategic peer, and maybe even to someone that the finance lead or the regional line of business leader is taking inspiration and direction from, of these are things we have to do if we want to take on the next strategic goals.
Okay, and in the spirit of being just about out of time, we have a great question on LinkedIn that maybe we'll have to close with. There's so much to talk about. Gosh, we could go on for a long time. This is from Dr. Carolina Sanchez Hernandez, and she says, how do we approach human oversight and human in control over ever more complex AI systems? And I'm thinking there's so much. I'm thinking agents, for example.
Yeah. And we just published our Human Capital Trends Report, which is the sister org, brother org of Tech Trends, that has a very detailed breakdown of how to make that exactly real and right. But the takeaway here, and I love this spirit to end it on, we started with a technologist saying we should spend less on technology, Michael, which is probably not what you had on your bingo card. And we'll end with the human times machine is the most essential equation we need to figure out. And it's not just for oversight and accountability. That's a piece of it. Like, how do we keep human in loop on loop? But also, as we think about work redesigning culture and how do we harness the full potential, the tools are going to continue to be the tools. They're ingredients, they're not recipes, and we need more chefs able to give us 3-star Michelin meal equivalents that we can then not talk about headlines of agents. We can talk about litany of real metrics that matter.
I love that. The litany of real metrics that matter. Bill Briggs is Deloitte's CTO. Bill, thank you so much for taking your time to be with us today, and especially given the fact that your ISP, that your internet connection stopped working at home and you're making do on your phone.
We persevered. Sorry if anyone got seasick or nauseous from moving around, but we did it, Michael. Always a pleasure.
We did it. And folks who were listening and you guys who asked your questions, even if I didn't get to your questions are awesome. You guys are an incredible audience. And right this second, I want you to go to CXOTalk.com to subscribe to our newsletter because we have great shows coming up. Our next show is in a couple of weeks, and we have the Chief Financial Officer of HPE. We're going to be talking about some of these issues with her. So go to CXOTalk.com, subscribe to our newsletter, ask your questions and keep them coming, and we'll see you next time. Have a great day, everybody.